What's up, people? Welcome to this episode of the Buy the Hood podcast or webcast because I don't know how you're consuming this content. I'm your host, as always. My name is Jimmy, and welcome to episode 200 and Magic Johnson, 232. As we start off every show, that's with gratitude. I want to say shout out and thank you to all of our supporters, new YouTube subscribers, as well as all the students from Buy the Hood University, our private group, MDC Strategy, everybody there, as well as the youth from the Buy the Hood Ownership Camp. My partner in Crown Core is back with me. Core, what's up, good brother?
What it is, though?
Man, listen, man, I ain't got no complaints, man. I'm here, ready to put some work in, man, and have a great conversation, man. How about yourself?
Man, I ain't gonna complain. I'm above the ground. I can change anything that I need to get changed because I still got breath and I'm still mobile and my brain is still agile, you know what I mean? Like I can still do everything. So I feel good, man.
Nothing to complain about. I heard that. Yo, want to send a special shout out also to all the people that left comments and reviews and everything of our new show on the channel, Stack Sats or Die Trying, which that first episode came out. Our Friday live is now turned into audio as well. So we got a lot of stuff going on, man. But if you're not subscribed to the audio feed, make sure you do so. The link for that's in the description because we're on Spotify, Google, as well as Apple, so do all the YouTubing and stuff, like, comment, subscribe. But for those that may be here for the first time, our show is dedicated to talking about all things Black wealth and personal finance. So Corey and I, have conversations based on what's in the news and what's going on, but it's generally surrounding those topics, and we give our opinions, thoughts on said issue. Now, one of the things we talked about recently was that article that came out that was talking about how many more, younger Black folks are investing, and there was a whole, parade and circle jerk on the internet about that, and we did a whole show giving kind of a counter perspective to that. But I came across this article, and let me pull the article up. And for those that are just listening to this on audio, I will put the link to this article in the show notes. It's from Fortune magazine, and it came out a couple days ago. And it's titled "The Wealth Gap is Getting Worse, and Rich White People Are Getting Even Richer." And they used a picture of Dan Aykroyd and Eddie
That's
Murphy.
why I'm laughing.
Yeah, so greatest movie ever, by the way, and I'm not debating that with nobody. Single greatest movie ever. But with that being said, Cora Lewis wrote this article. And this article kind of talks about some of the logic and thinking that we were talking about when everybody was excited about more or less investing in the market, right? So not hating, because that's a good thing overall, but the amount of pennies that we're putting into the market right now isn't enough. And that's why economics alone isn't enough, right? Policy and has to be a part of our strategic play, in terms of Black wealth, if you believe there is any Black wealth. But that's a whole other story. Let me read a couple lines from this article because it's very interesting. And we did a video or podcast a little while ago, and we talked about are people not investing in the stock market? And they kind of talk about that here. But here we go. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a longer article, but just want to add some context to this conversation. So it says, a strong performance in financial markets, particularly an outsized gain for the stock market in 2021, helped entrench existing trends of wealth inequality during the pandemic, new data released this week shows. According to a report from the New York Federal Reserve Bank, the real net worth of white individuals outgrew that of Black and Hispanic individuals by 30 percentage points and 9 percentage points respectively, from the first quarter of 2019 through the second quarter of 2023. So it says the period featured a remarkable level of government financial support, and after the initial shock of the pandemic, a strong job market. The unemployment rate for Black Americans is now at 5.3%, near a record low, compared to an overall unemployment rate of 3.7%. Earnings for the typical Black full-time worker are up 7.1% since the pandemic. So here's where it gets interesting. Closing the wealth gap is more difficult because a significantly larger number of white households traditionally have money in stocks and mutual funds. A separate Fed survey shows that as of 2022, about 65.6% of white households had investments in stocks, compared with 28.3% for Hispanic households and 39.2% for Black households. The study really shows a difference between making gains when it comes to income and closing that gap versus when it comes to wealth. said Janelle Jones, Vice President of Policy and Advocacy for the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. I want to reread that one sentence because that says a lot. So the study shows the difference between making gains when it comes to income and closing the gap versus when it comes to wealth. Because a lot of people think that income and wealth are synonymous, and they're making a distinction right there. Now, I think that's important. Yep. So skipping ahead, it says much of the divergence in net worth by race and ethnicity since 2019 can be attributed to divergence in the real values of financial asset holdings. It says the fact that Black households have more wealth concentrated in pensions than in stocks, mutual funds, and exchange traded funds, or ETFs, right? It says more than 50% of Black financial wealth is invested in pensions. Less than 20% of Black wealth is stored in private businesses, corporate equities, or mutual funds. In contrast, less than 30% of white financial wealth is in pensions, with about 50% in businesses, equities, and mutual funds. It says Black workers are still more likely to be unionized, which may play a part in the pension story. But how folks are exposed to the ability to invest in the stock market, whether or not it's something they grew up doing, we know that's different for white families than for people of color. Black family members are less likely to get an inheritance also. Another aspect, right? So it's a lot in this article, right? The little part about the unions, I think that unions are necessary. They're needed, right? So I don't want this to come off as any anti-union thing, because I think being part of a union and understanding the stock market, you could do both, right? It's not one or the other. But that last bar right there, Black family members are less likely to get an inheritance. That's the part.
Yep. So we had an attorney on. I forget which one, because when we be doing this podcast, this is episode 200 of Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
And they said that wealth isn't created during life. Most wealth is created during death. And I forget which one of those attorneys said that, but I think it may have been our sister from the Black Courtney. Courtney. And she was telling us that most wealth is created at death, because most white people get their money from an inheritance.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter.
The first time they ever get a big chunk of money is from an inheritance.
Yeah, so a lot of times, right? And this is something else. This is a whole other story, but we might have to talk about it while we're here. A lot of times with certain pensions, depending upon the relationship of the heirs, you may not get any of it, right? If it's not a spouse.
You ain't gotta tell me that.
Oh, you said you learned through experience, huh?
Man, I'm LOX when it comes to that.
Yeah, so a lot of times people think that, okay, my sister worked for the school district for 40 years. When she goes, I get the pension, and that ain't how that works.
No,
unless you're direct heir or a spouse. Like so it's like that's the other part, right? So if we have a lot of our wealth stored in a pension, a lot of that pension doesn't get passed through, right? And this comes to understanding and getting involved in the markets earlier. But this is why it can't be economics alone, it's policy, because when we start talking about inheritance, those inheritance goes back generation after generation after generation. I remember, I'll never forget, it's a true story. When I was in law school, right? I was scrambling trying to pay for my books. Anybody who's been away to college knows sometimes, man, the part of college that hits you, you finally get your tuition taken care of. You know what I mean? You got your meal plan, and then they like, oh yeah, you got to buy your books. You're like, what you mean I got to buy my books? And them college books, bro. I mean, you got a son in college now. I don't know if it's still the same way, because, not trying to date myself, there wasn't a whole lot of iPads and digital books back then. You had to buy the text.
Yeah, I'm going to say that we paid for the books, but I'm not going to say what we paid for those books.
All I'm going to say is this, dog. Back then, there was no digital, so you had to actually buy the textbooks, and those textbooks were a grip. And I remember sitting there, and I'm watching this young lady in the school bookstore, and she's just copying everything at one time. It wasn't even a thought. And she's just like, she had it so much that she was buying her regular like pencil and paper from the bookstore. They taxing that anyway.
Yeah, they taxing that dumb heavy.
I'm sitting there like, all right, so then we just get to talking, and I'm coming to find out like one of the buildings is named after her great grandfather. Her father sat on the state board or this, and I'm sitting there like, I don't got none of that.
None of it.
I ain't got none of that. Right? So, I had hardworking family, like that made sacrifices.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? And I wouldn't trade that for anything, right? Because I'm way better off than the previous generation of my family, which is how it's supposed to be. You know, my mom passed away and I had an inheritance, so I can't complain about that. But what I'm saying is, when you start to talk to people from you know, different places, bro, they on their fourth and fifth generation. Like my
Yeah,
mom went
man.
to college, and she, you know what I mean? Like she went to college. I graduated college. My mom didn't graduate. I graduated college, but it's like there's still families that I know of who now are just getting first generation college graduates, first generation professionals. Like, you know, we're behind the curve, right?
Yeah.
So I bring all this up in the context of this conversation because when we start talking about Black wealth, a lot of it isn't just that we're not doing the right things. People try to paint this picture like, if you stop, you know, the whole Bill Cosby pound cake speech, if you got to pull your pants up and stop buying Jordans and spend it in the right place, like, bro, the difference between the wealth gap ain't a lot of that, dog. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a lot of that. And the data tells you that. Who
No,
buys the
100% it
who buys
tells
the
you that.
most Jordans? It ain't our folks because we can't afford it, right?
It's mostly, you know, inherited wealth that's the wealth gap. Because we weren't allowed to build that wealth allowed, you know what I mean? Because I'm not even
Mhm.
gonna go into what really happened because we only have a few minutes on this episode, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't want to go off on that whole tangent. But
But
it
go ahead.
plays such an important part in building and wealth building, right? The stock market wasn't always available to us, right?
Mhm.
And so when the number one factor in building wealth is time. And so
Man,
when
look.
time we wasn't so this is why I'm bringing it up because the number one thing in wealth building is to have money compound over time. And if you can't have that compounded time, then there's always going to be a gap, right?
So
Go
yeah,
ahead.
you spitting bars because I had a conversation with you on Friday before we did our Friday show, and I was telling you like how much bread I had made in the market, right? And I was excited about it. I'll never put that out there on our podcast because I ain't trying to end up in nobody trunk. I'm still from Philly. But the thing about, and I've said this several times, that I get survivor's remorse a lot as it comes to me building what I'm building for my family because I have knowledge that I know that the people before me didn't have. But as I get to certain points and the money starts to, you know, compound and I see the effects of compound, I start to think about, yo, when you get to a certain level, it's almost like Brewster's Millions. And for those who've never seen that movie, go watch
You
it.
can't spend it. You can't spend it
You,
all.
because it's moving so
It's,
fast. You can't
and
go
it's
back.
making so much money. You can't even spend it all.
You know, unless you're just really egregious, like you want some Mike Tyson, like buying alligators and lions, and unless you really egregious. But if you're living in regular life, like there's sometimes, and you know, we always mention books in our podcast. I want to point people to a book they may or may not have read. It's called The Prince of Darkness, right? The author's name is Shane
Oh,
White,
boy, was a
and
piece of work.
the Prince of Darkness is about one Jeremiah Hamilton, who a lot of people consider him the first black millionaire from Wall Street, and he's a terrible human being. I'm gonna start off by saying that. Like, he's not a likable person, but he was a black man, and he was able to like manipulate and learn the markets in a way that enabled him to make millions of dollars in the stock market. But what's interesting about the book to me is because of the time that it happened. I don't have the exact time. I'm trying to remember what it was. In the middle of the 19th century sometime. So anyway, um, he
Yeah.
the hoops that he had to get through just to be able to invest, such as having white proxies and things of that nature. And I'm not going to give the book away, so I want you guys to read it for those that like to read. But that shows you that at a time where certain folks, great grandparents and parents were like owning buildings and buying land in Manhattan, we couldn't do it. We legally couldn't do it. And I say all that to say this stuff compounds. You muted, by the way, Corey.
Yeah. What I was saying is the compound interest of 100 years of not even being able to own that stuff. That's not something you can make up in a flurry in the stock market.
Exactly. So no matter how much you did in the pandy, you ain't catching up, right? That's just what it is. Like, it's going to take policy, which is why I think that we talk about black wealth, but I think black wealth is deeper than just economics. And I know a lot of people get upset when I say that on both sides. I get it from the people who say, oh, you talk about economics too much. It's really about this. But then I get hit from the economics folks, like, you talk about policy, but it takes both. Let me read something else from this article real quick, too, because this is another interesting piece. And then we can, finish the discussion. But it says owning a business is another component of financial wealth. And separate data shows Black-owned businesses had a tougher time during the pandemic. Now, to get a little context to it. While less than 10% of all U.S. business owners are Black-owned businesses were also more concentrated in industries hardest hit when COVID first spread. According to the Economic Policy Institute, an analysis of government data, in April 2020, more than 40% of Black business owners reported they were not working, compared with only 17% of white business owners. The industries with the largest total job losses early in the pandemic were sectors where more Black-owned businesses are concentrated. That is accommodation, food services, retail, healthcare, and social assistance. About 28% of Black-owned businesses are found in these industries, compared with under 20% of white-owned businesses, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I also thought that was very interesting in this article. Is not that, some of us do own businesses, but even the businesses that we own are concentrated, like whether that's, food, right? Or some of the social services. A lot of us have businesses in those spaces. Nothing wrong with that. But those were the spaces most hit hard where folks couldn't work and get an income. So I think that's interesting too, as we move forward to figure out how to get into some of these other spaces, which is why the trades as well as technology is very, very important. So I thought that was an interesting part of the article. But Core, I know I've been gunning and running my mouth because
hey, listen, you was hot though. You was on fire.
But I wanted to read those parts of the article. Now I'm going to close the article. There's a lot more in the article that goes. It gives more detail and more context, but I'll leave it in the show notes as well as the description for folks to read. But I definitely want to get your overall perspective on what you read here. And just what you think about this article or anything that was said in our conversation.
I mean, I'm not surprised because we in the markets every day and we already know. Two, we talk about black wealth all the time, and your job requires you to do a lot of independent study, as does mine. You know what I mean? Like you do data analysis on real estate and things of that nature, and I do data analysis on people. Yes. You know what I mean? So it's our jobs are similar, but a little bit different. But so when I look at those, numbers, and when I hear those, there's nothing that surprises me about that because, but it's me and it's you, right? Yeah. But to the general masses, the thing that our government does very, very well is confuse the hell out of people. Like it used to do a good job of that. Now they don't even care. Like they just tell you, and they be like, "What you gonna do?" But our government does such a magnificent job of keeping people busy that people don't really see what's really going on, right? Because you got taxes, right, and then you got silent tax, which is inflation. And so if you got taxes and inflation going on, and so your money is getting taxed 2, 3, 4, 5 different ways, there's no way in the world that the vast majority of people are going to be able to do that, because the only way that this changes is through policy or rebellion, and it ain't changing through policy because policy doesn't benefit. Policy very, very, very rarely benefits the masses. Yeah, most policy benefits a very small subsection of people, and so we got to get into that subsection of people that gets the benefits. You know what I mean? Like that's really what it's really about. Like,
so it's a couple things here, man. Because if people actually knew how inflation worked, I think there'd be like fire and riots in the street. But it's such a evil way of getting more out of folks. I had a conversation with a sister yesterday. She called me looking for help. Right? She said before the pandemic, she had a 1-bedroom apartment in Germantown. She was paying like $650. It was a small 1-bedroom, right? Since then, up to now, she said that it's like a little over $2,000 for the same space. She said she had to move once already, right, to another place, and she's still paying close to $2,000 now. And she says, as I look around, and she was like, yo, she didn't have any kids, her by herself. She's like, as I look around, I can't find anything under $1,000 or even at $1,000. So I'm like showing her different stuff on the market, and I'm like, I got to the point where I was like, kind of like, not that it is what it is. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. So then she started having conversations about like looking at her job and seeing if she can like
find more money.
Well, not just that, see how far of a distance she would have to travel to kind of keep her job. So she has like a hybrid work from home thing. She was thinking about like moving like to Williamstown, Reading, like one of the cheaper places. Is the cost of goods and services. She was complaining, like she was like, yo, when I go to the market, by the time I go to the market and pay my rent, I have no money. She was like, so I might have to figure out a way to lower my cost by geographically moving. But that's going to put a burden because now you're talking about wear and tear in your car. So it's like it's just
you're not going to. Yeah, let me tell you, as a person who did that, right? Because I moved outside of the city. Well, not because of the prices of where I was living, but because of the taxes. I moved out of Philadelphia because of the taxes. It wasn't because of violence or any of that. I mean, I grew up in the crack era 80s, so the violence that we see now is you know what I mean?
Yeah,
not to say in, but you know what I mean? I grew up in the crack era 80s. Like I seen Philadelphia crazy. So that wasn't what made me move. The taxes are so burdensome. And the thing that made me move was the Philadelphia Parking Authority. It wasn't even, out of all of the taxes in the city, the one that made me move was the Philadelphia Parking Authority. Because they were costing me like $800 to $1,000 a month. They were costing me a rent payment.
For those that watching our show that don't know, that's like our parking enforcement agency. So the part Corey leaving out is how he parks reckless.
I do not park recklessly, first and foremost.
So you saying they ticket you for no reason?
No. So I live near, when I lived in Philadelphia, I lived near Roosevelt Boulevard, which has the whole boulevard got camera lights.
Yeah.
So if you, like sometimes, especially during rush hour when I get off work, if you get caught in the middle of the street in one of those joints, you get a red light ticket. And them joints is $100 a pop.
I mean,
if you don't pay them,
I'll never take their side because they are scoundrels. But technically speaking, you ain't supposed to get caught in the middle of the road. You're not supposed to go
how do you, if I'm turning and then all of a sudden the traffic stops in front of me, what am I supposed to do?
What I'm saying is, I'm not trying to turn it to a traffic thing, but back when you took your permit, it tells you, and I know that's been ages, you ain't supposed to pull out or anything unless you know you have a clear way. But I forget all that.
I have a clear way. Okay.
I don't forget all that, though.
Roosevelt Boulevard is the most dangerous road in the United States. First and foremost, which is why there's all those traffic cameras, because Roosevelt Boulevard is the most dangerous road.
Listen, I know you said I got clapped with a ticket there. I just had to pay it. I had to chalk it up, like, because they had
listen. I was saying it because I needed my vehicle because
I was gonna fight it until they opened the letter and looked at the next page, and they had like the actual footage of me trying
doing what you said you ain't do.
Yo, I'm red-handed, dog. I'm not even gonna fight y'all on this. Just take this bread and leave me alone.
Yeah, but no. So most of my tickets were of those of that variety, those red light tickets. And if you don't pay it within 10 days, that $100 become $125, which is a 25% tax in a 10-day span.
Yeah.
So that's absolute. First of all, that's berserk. A 25% tax in a 10-day span. Anyway, I was getting clapped for like $600-700 a month on them joints. Then you park 4 inches too far into a space, they hit you with a ticket, or you. There's certain streets on our joint in Philadelphia where if you park, you got to put money into the meter. Mm-hmm. You put a quarter in the meter, give you 15 minutes. If you come back in 16 minutes, you will definitely have a ticket. Like I
got beef with them for another reason, because one of them jabronis wrote me a ticket for something I didn't do. But that's either here nor there. But the point I was making about with her, though, it wasn't taxes. It was like, yo, just the cost of literally everything. Like,
but what I'm saying is the silent taxes go along with the cost of everything.
No, right? I get it.
Philadelphia is one of the most taxed municipalities in the country, period, anyway.
Like
Philadelphia is heavily taxed municipal.
So,
heavily
statistically speaking, that's kind of not true, right? Because what's your comparison point when you look at big cities? It's kind of anyway. I'm not gonna get into the data of it, but that's kind of not true. A lot of people in Philadelphia always say that, but I'm like, well, did you ever, like, okay, move to New York. Tell me about that, right? Because all right, move to DC, and you tell me that Philadelphia's heavy tax, right? Move to Baltimore. Like
what I'm saying is the prices are higher there, but the taxes
are higher
nuts.
too. Taxes are higher too.
I guess, man.
No,
the way that the taxes was killing me.
Yeah. So, but New York be having taxes, dog. I was looking at something today where they were talking about like it was about real estate, but when you buy a property over a certain amount, they have what they call something they created in New York. It's called a mansion tax, and it don't even got to be for a mansion. It's just based on price. But you can't buy anything in New York cheap anyway, so everybody gets hit with this mansion tax, which is several $1,000s. I'm like, yo, that's ridiculous. Like, so it's like, anyway. But I mean, taxes itself is something that should be questioned. But I'm just talking about the silent tax of everything just costing more. When she called to complain to me, she was talking about the rents, how she just couldn't afford it. She was talking about the price of eggs and like bacon, just regular stuff in the market. You go buy, you know what I mean? By the time you buy some meat, eggs and milk and everything, like, you're spending a mortgage.
I had my kids by myself this summer. My wife was at a science program at the University of Iowa State, and she, the kids was with me. So I had 4 boys and me by myself this summer. And my food bill when I lived alone was about $250 a month.
Mm-hmm.
With them 4 in the house, it was $1,800.
So think about this, right? As we talk about the wealth gap, tying it into our article. How are you supposed to even start to do anything when what it costs just to live is getting
goes up?
Because one thing she said to me when she was asking about the apartment, and to be honest with you, to be completely honest with you, as of right now, I have no solution for her. She may have to kind of like move out of the city, so it's messing with their geography. But it's like, how are you supposed to do anything? That's why this whole game is rigged. I get the feeling sometimes, right, that there's a big game at play. We ain't in the clubhouse of those that make the rules and do everything, but I feel like they're like getting their last squeeze. You know what I'm saying? Out of the lemon before everything goes bust. Like
before the fall of the empire.
Dog, it's like we're gonna see how far we can push it, right? Because it's like a take thing. Everything just costs more. Like how does the average family? And that's the last point I want to make about this article, because I shared this article with a couple folks, and sometimes people's responses are shocking to me, but it made me realize something, right? You tend to spend time around people who are similar to you, right? And I've just been blessed in terms of, like I told my family, making sacrifices for me to go to college and be in certain spaces. And so a lot of my friends are college graduates. I got friends from all walks of life, but that's also intentional, because what I realize is a lot of my friends who are like upwardly mobile are stuck in their bubbles. So when you talk to them about what the data looks like, that's not what they see. They like, nah, I make 6 figures. I invest in the market. I'm living here. I'm doing that. I'm like, but that's not the average person. Let's look at the data. And a lot of times with our people, bro, we get into certain spaces and we don't even realize what's really going on because we are in our bubbles. So I think it's important for us to spend time outside of our bubbles and be intentional about it.
Yeah.
And really look at how people are doing. People are out here struggling.
No, actually, like struggling hard. Like it's the cost of living is so crazy, right? And when I was probably 15 years ago, when I first got married, I was making about $1,000 a week, which was not a crazy amount of money, but $52,000 a year was all right, teaching. You know what I mean? That was an okay salary. Last year, when I retired from teaching out of Philadelphia, I was making close to $100,000, and I was bringing home more in 15 years ago than I was last year. And that's how that'll tell you how much everything changed in 15 years. I was making damn near double and bringing home less.
Here's the other part, right? Here's the other part. I know the last thing was my last point, but there's one more point though. I was doing this research because I was trying to figure out this whole. It started with a joke I saw on Twitter. It wasn't really a joke. Dude was serious, but it became a joke to Twitter because they roasted him. Bo was like, six figures ain't the goal no more. I got to make at least $500,000, right? So everybody was like, yo, doofus, $500,000 is six figures, right? Because in our head, six figures for most people was 100,000.
Yeah.
Because of that joke, it made me start to look up. I'm like, well, where did this whole thing of six figures come from? The adage of I got to make six figures. And it's something that started like in the 80s, late like 70s, 80s, about the idea of six figures being a great income. People say, I make six figures. This is a great income. But part of the technology in that is what six figures was able to purchase in, say, 1979, 1980.
Compared to what is
to 2024. If you made $100,000 in like 1980, that's the equivalent of making $400,000 now. Right? So a lot of people don't make $400,000, but that's the technology.
$400,000 is 2% of the country.
So they got us in this thing where in our head, if we make six figures, then we doing it. Not understanding that six figures in 1980 is not the same as six figures in 2020.
Not at all.
So
not even close.
It's like these little games that are being played in, anyway, what type of games are being played? How's it going there? Anyway, with that being said, man, this is an interesting article that I will share with everyone. It's from Fortune Magazine. I will put a link in the description as well as the show notes. So what I have for audience is this. First thing I want to ask is, what are your thoughts on still our lack of participation in owning businesses? And I know it's something that we struggle with as a community because in having conversation with people, specifically in the real estate space, they do not want to deal with paper assets, not understanding that's where the real growth comes from. So I know it's still a thing that we have to, uphill battle we have to fight. But also, I'd like to know your opinion of the cost of living out there. How's the cost of living changed where you're at? There are a lot of people that watch our program from all over the country. And I know we always get people to weigh in from California. We got a lot of Texas in the building. East Coast, So I would just love to hear how the cost of living is affecting you wherever you are. Because that it's affecting everything from housing, to clothing, to, the price at the pump, gasoline. I didn't even bring that up.
Man.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, everything goes up.
I'm gonna tell you like this, as a father and as a person who does some shopping in my house, the first place I noticed that anything costs more is at the supermarket.
It's funny because the first time, when I really notice when stuff is going, is literally the price of eggs, dog. I don't know what it is about eggs, but it's like they're a microcosm of what this going on in the world, man. Eggs is crazy, bro. When I know when everything is about to go haywire is when I go to the supermarket. Like I was going to my neighborhood supermarket, and I used to buy like the sliced watermelons. And just my little fruit stuff, watermelons, pineapples, apples, oranges, bananas, blah 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 blah. So my kids can eat semi-healthy. And I used to get all of that stuff $50 or less, right? I tried that right before I left to come here, and that same tab was like $120. Same stuff, nothing different. I was buying the exact same thing, and the same $50 was costing me $120, and that's over like a 4-year span from panty time to when I just left. That was a 4-year span. From that same tab was $50 was about $120. So you're talking about more than 100% cost of living increase on just that. And I'm talking about in the same quantity. Because I got a shopping list. I go shopping the same way every single time. No, I get it. I mean, it's the cost of things. I could tell. Like one of the things I like to, spoil myself with. I had to get fresh fish from Whole Foods, man. little cod, little salmon. You know what I'm saying? The fresh one. You know what I mean? I don't want the frozen. I want the fresh. I ain't been there in a couple months now, dog.
Like, I don't need it that bad.
I don't need to be cussed at when I walk in the store, dog. You know what I'm saying? Like, so with all that being said, though, man, just give us some feedback, man. What do you guys think about this article? Also, have you ever heard of Jeremiah Hamilton? Still want to add that to make sure people don't forget.
If you haven't, you need to look my man up. But let me tell you one more thing about the cost of things going up, right? Mm-hmm. So 2 days ago at the Super Bowl, me and my wife tried to buy 2 pizzas and 18 wings. What do you think? What do you think 2 pizzas and 18 wings cost?
$50.
You short $13.
Yeah, that's a
2 medium pizzas and 18 wings. They tried to charge us $63 for 2 medium pizzas and 18 wings, boss.
Damn.
I was like, yo. I said, what the hell happened to the price? Yo, 2 pieces and me. I'm thinking 35. All right, maybe the price went up 10, 20, 50, 30%. I'm like, I have to pay 40, 45. Boy, says $63 for 2 medium pizzas.
What happened to this country, bro?
Wings.
What happened to this country? This used to be a beautiful country, man.
Yo, I was like, how much do the wings cost? He said 18 wing parts cost $33.
All right, man. That was enough.
That was enough. And if you don't believe me, go to Pizza Hut, go online and see how much 18 wings cost.
So here's what I want to know. What do you think about the article, right? And our avoidance of stock. How is inflation in the cost of goods and services? How's that affecting you where you are, wherever you are? And let us know where you are. And have you ever heard of Jeremiah Hamilton? And if not, make sure you do some research on Jeremiah Hamilton. Shout out to everybody, though, man. Another great episode, another great talk with my bro. Friday, we will be live 7 p.m. Doing our regular Friday live show, as well as our Bitcoin giveaway, because we do give away Bitcoin every Friday. Shout out to Bitcoin cracking 50K. It is what it is. And also be on the lookout for Stacks Have to Die trying to probably have another episode. Not probably will have another episode 2 out Monday. But as we always say, it is not about how much money you make. It's about how much you keep. Keep elevates, and we'll see you guys in our next episode. Peace.